with I love that new Zoom feature. Um, I work with Darcy on working with organizations on how do we maximize the strategy by empowering people. And we came together a few years back. We were having lunch. We'd never met one another, and we were talking about what we loved about what we do and what frustrated us about what we do. And she loves doing strategy. She loves the clinical, like push, 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 figure out where you need to go, put the numbers together. And she said, but it's so frustrating to her when the people aren't equipped to get it done. And I started laughing. We were at good old Bob Evans, my country club, and I said, well, that's so funny because I love getting people to somewhere, but when I don't have the power of a strategy, it's hard to really cast that vision and motivate and inspire people to bring their behaviors together, work well together, learn how to get through change and to the other side. So that sparked what is now Stretch. And with Stretch Strategic Leaders, we really want people to feel equipped to both. We love saying that strategy or that culture invites strategy to lunch, because if you don't have the culture, you can't get the strategy done. And then, of course, we can make the argument it goes the other way too. So that's what we're all about. Let me do a couple of quick introductions here today. We've got Jane Meyer on the line. Jane is, we were just laughing at Jane and Riley and mine's backgrounds because it fits our personality. Jane is our organizational guru, putting together everything that is the brilliance of marketing and branding and all things that keep us moving forward. Riley, who is our speaker today, is our creative, beautiful mastermind genius around people and how you put branding and people together. And Riley runs careerforme.coach, where she helps people figure out career and what skills they need to do, starting all the way down into the high school years. We've also got Nancy McCarthy online, and Nancy does all of our business administrative back-end work. So that's kind of our crew. And I'll tell you just 2 seconds on kind of what we do. I covered the who we are part. You know us. I think everybody on here either knows Darcy or me. We serve mid-sized companies who really have a dream for making an impact in the world of business and make an impact through nonprofit and any type of how can we get better. And what we do is just very simple. We tie your strategy and your people together, and with a passion that people get to love the work that they do and go home and tell their families about how great it is to work at their organization. We've got a good bit of background between us. I laugh that we're getting to be old, but I'm reminding myself that 55 these days is not old, and I've got a couple on Darcy. Our whole process here is to make sure that we've got healthy leaders, winning strategies, and empowered teams. If you want to get us excited, start asking us questions about that, and we can go on and on for forever. And then today we're going to hear from Riley Scott, and you'll have to take a look at careerforme.com or .coach, sorry, and see what she does. She comes with a powerhouse background. She spent over 25 years doing corporate work and is very highly decorated in winning branding and marketing awards. She's got a wide array of background in people and how people tie to your business. So I'm going to turn it over to her here as we kind of chat through. Quick guidelines, as always. Number one, you can type any question in chat. We will be monitoring those. Jane seems to be a little bit better than I am on that because I love listening to everybody. Interrupt all you want. We called this a chat and not a webinar or a training class because we want people's ideas. It's so important to us that this is a conversation. Riley started out a minute ago saying there was so much information on this. I know I have put together presentations on this. Melissa Egbert, who's online, has put together presentations on this. It goes on and on and on and on. And so feel free to dive in with your thoughts, your questions, and answer one another's questions. We are not here to act like the gurus. We're here to continue in a path of learning. introduce yourself in chat. One of the things that we have found is our favorite part of this is seeing all these people together. And we love that the people we love get to meet one another. And we're just glad you're here. And on that note, Darcy is not here. She is, it's funny, she has some real seasons. Summertime is a huge season for her because everybody wants to do a strategy check-in. And so she's kind of up to her eyeballs right now doing quick quarterly strategy check-ins, and was really like, we all had our team meeting yesterday and she was bummed that she wasn't here. She was like, tell everybody I miss them. So Darcy misses y'all and is off doing the magic that is Darcy and helping companies get better and better. So I am going to hand this over with much excitement and appreciation to my dear friend Riley Scott to take over. And Riley, you are on.
Okay, great. I'm thinking everybody should be good with my screen at this point. All right. I'm kind of like Lance. I'm dealing with the double screens, but I kind of like it that way. It gives me a little more space. So we're here today, and we call it XYZ, collaborating with Gen Y and Gen Z. So there are all kinds of things we can talk about, and we will talk about in this grouping. But first, I'd like to ask you, where are we represented on this call? So if you don't mind just popping into the chat and saying, are you Gen X, Gen Y? I don't know if we have any Gen Zers on here, but also baby boomers. So let us know what we're looking at here. So prior to this presentation, I did a quick survey on LinkedIn, and I was looking at my feed, and I was curious to see, how the participation looked on that. And what I did find was that most of the people who were reading a lot of the material information were Gen X. And can you tell me right now, because I can't see my chat here, Jane, what are we looking at for our group here? Are we mostly
I'm seeing a lot of X.
Okay, yeah, that's not a surprise because I was seeing that also on the LinkedIn feed. So that was just kind of one of the fun things that we could start with and kind of get grounding on where we all are and some of our, views on things. So we're going to start off here. So why do we really categorize generations? We do it because it's fun, right? There's a humor to it. So like any good presentation, I'm going to start with dessert first. So now this is a really deep thought for you. You ready? Have you ever considered the most popular cake in the year that you were born? Yeah, those are some of the big discussions here. We're going to have fun with it. So I went through and looked. So baby boomers, while we're digging in here, some of the most relevant ones were in 1961 and 1965, the pink champagne cake. It's the height of popularity during that time period and was devoured off of lovely dessert plates, I'm sure. For Generation X, it was the Jell-O poke cake. So I don't know about all of you on the call, but most of us have probably had that. That's where you bake the cake, you make holes in it, you pour on the Jell-O, and then you put it in the refrigerator and then put the topping on. So anybody, feel free to pop in chat if you've actually had a Jell-O poke cake. I have. Then we can also talk about fun. So, Gen Y, it's all about fun here. Think of funfetti. Actually, in 1989, rainbow sprinkles were not just a cake decoration, they suddenly became part of the cake. So you put it into the mix, and that obviously, it gets the party started. So Gen Z, they're the cupcake kids. Cupcakes really flexed muscles in the 2000s. You went from the traditional cupcakes to the special gourmet cupcakes like, let's try, let me see, a lemon cupcake with lavender, or maybe for some of you bacon lovers, a maple bacon cupcake. And what's interesting is this cultural trend, we've seen it replace traditional wedding cakes even. So now you have, cupcakes instead of wedding cakes that you would have seen in the past. So aside from the fun we've had with cakes, we can't forget about the multitude of surveys and how they can guess your age magically. And how do they do this, right? How are they guessing your age? Well, what it is it's really an alignment by the writers along with popular cultures and trends. So once again, tying into the generations. And that gives context to the generation. So now we also have to touch on the slams, like we've talked about in the past. There's a labeling of generations, and this is nothing new, right? So baby boomers, or at least a portion of them, were called hippies, and that wasn't a kind thing back then. And Gen Ys received the nickname snowflakes by older generations. And really the newest slam, and I'm sure you've probably seen it in the news, is about side parts in skinny jeans, right? So this is serious stuff we've got to cover here. So we have Dwight, if you're a fan of The Office. And he's saying, Gen Z's acting like they invented the middle part. We've had it all along. And we also have some of the Gen Z doesn't realize that what started out as regular jeans in your 20s actually becomes skinny jeans in your 30s. And probably in your 40s, I'm getting rid of mine at least. But all this is really fueled in part by the media. And that's what I wanted to point out here. And that's just kind of a fun way for us to look at this. But from the beginning of time, generations have slammed on each other. There's always the big difference in things. I'm going to show you a little bit later in the presentation that there are some similarities that are really going to be important to us in this conversation. So, from flappers to, hippies, everything's covered from fashion, whether it's skinny jeans or side parts. So why are we doing this categorization of generations? Well, it really helps us as humans make sense of things. And also, we're all not the same, but there are some similarities and common experiences if we grew up in the US. There are cultural touch points, and that's what you're seeing in any of the surveys. And that's, fashion, like we were talking about, food, as proven by the cake examples, music, TV shows, media, and different events. Now, what this really implies is the information about the shared experiences and the shared experiences you have as a generation. So what you're going to find is that while people have their own personal characteristics based on how they were raised, that's more of the psychological side. But when you categorize a generation, you're really looking at the sociology of it. You're looking and studying the demographics to learn a little bit more. You're looking at the shared experiences of that group and also the cultural patterns of the group. So that kind of puts it into perspective here. So I thought it'd be interesting for us to check with an example. What is NASA? So Bridgework asked both baby boomers and Gen X the same question. What's your first memory of NASA? So this is what the baby boomers said, landing on the moon. And this is the logo from 1969. The Gen Xers answer, the Challenger explosion. So what this shows you is this is the exact same institution, but it's based on a different vantage point and how people see things differently. And that's really what a lot of this is about here. It's the differences that really form distinct generational personalities that you'll find. So some of the food for thought that we have here is Gen X is starting to look at retirement. How does that happen for those of us that are on the call that are Gen X? The first wave is turning 56 this year. And at that point in time, you're looking at career trajectory and what's going to get you to that next step. And the research also shows that maybe finances aren't exactly where people want them to be. And we might not be as well prepared as some of the baby boomers. What gets me is that Gen Y turns 40 years old this year. And a piece of me is just amazed at how quickly time flies with that when you think about that. So then grounding us further in, Gen Z is early in their career. The first wave is just hitting 24. So a lot of them are a couple of years out of college, or, with some of the COVID delays, they might be just now getting out. And so what you're going to find now is if you look at typical business, the average age of a manager is 30 years old. And what we're finding out is that management training isn't even beginning until 42. So what we need to look at is what the business really needs in doing this and what core skills can we offer to people earlier in their career? And at what point, are you making those moves even within your business? Now, Cindy will always tell you about different brain patterns and everything you can learn with that. I think it's also important to note that really at the age of 25, brain patterns solidify, and that doesn't mean people can't change by any means, but it means change is a little bit harder. The brain will just go for that easiest pathway to get the information. And it might take a little more effort to learn things, but all is not lost there. Really, by really flexing those muscles, you can really ensure your brain is moving forward and you're becoming innovative in business, even if you're not the 25-year-old or 24-year-old Gen Xer. And that goes for anybody on your staff as well. So some of the insights we have here with Gen Y, it's really fascinating when you look at them and you start looking at them as their spending. So it's a projected $1.4 trillion tab that they have. And that could be the highest spending generation. And that was projected for 2020. Now, what happened early in the career of Gen Y is that there were two, the once in a lifetime economic crises, right? So it happened to us twice. It hit them hard. And many of them started work during the recession. And that caused a lot of challenges. But where I think this is fascinating is with the inheritance. So Gen Y, also known as the millennials, is set to inherit over $68 trillion from baby booming parents. So for us, that means with that colossal inheritance, how that really is going to impact the way they think about business. Are they going to decide, I'd rather work part-time, or I'd rather follow a passion, or, maybe some of them have the option to retire early. That's going to be interesting to see. And it's something you may want to, keep a pulse point on, because once again, that number is predicted to start happening in 2030 for those numbers. Now, what you're also going to find is they're very tech driven. So while they aren't the digital native that Gen Y would be, technology is so important and so ingrained with who they are. So when you're working with them on a business side, you're going to want to work with them on different technology platforms. If, let's say, they're applying for jobs, they would love any of the apps that are on LinkedIn that make it easier to apply. If you have a system, let's say, where you can't just input the resume and a person has to go through and put each of the different resume pieces on, it's going to be a challenge for both Gen Y and Gen Z, because they're used to much more easy technology than a lot of us were, because we remember going in and physically typing into all the fields. For them, it should be just an upload, or at least that's the thought process. What you're also going to find is, in part because of some of the crises that they've dealt with, that they're really going to want some of the training programs. So with these training programs, they want you as a business to offer them different ways and find out how, so they can understand and find out how they can succeed. And there's also that purpose-driven work piece. It's to a different level than what we're going to talk about with Gen Y or Gen Z, excuse me, but there needs to be a deep purpose in the work that they're doing. And they really want to be judged by the results. So Gen Z, these are our digital natives, right? So they were, the original users of all the platforms. Think about it. It's Instagram in 2010, it's Snapchat in 2011, and TikTok in 2018. This technology and entrepreneurship is really part of their DNA. And what you're going to find is there are Gen Zs who create YouTube channels, and they've done things that none of us ever even thought of doing. Let's create a YouTube channel to talk about gaming or product reviews, and we're going to get paid with it too. This is the way they're thinking. They're very innovative in what they're doing. Pew Research was saying that Gen Z is really the most diverse generation, and they're the generation that is most focused on education. So what's interesting about that is a lot of Gen Z haven't had jobs in the past. So a lot of people, and a lot of us probably had some jobs in high school. They may not have had those. A lot of times parents are trying to focus, a majority of them, on the education piece, and those jobs haven't been happening to that level. So when you think about yourself as an employer, there are some on-the-job skills that they haven't received by the time they've gotten to you that other people would have had. And I have to say that when you look at their income too, it's staggering when you think about them as a group. So they're projected to hit $33 trillion in income in 2030. That's 9 years away. That really shows the amount of people that would be coming into the workforce, and also the revenue they'll be able to generate for themselves and for your business when you think about those types of things. And they're going to pass Gen Y's spending power a year later. So 2031, they're more than what Gen Y was. So this is a generation we really want to think about and talk about. What you find with them is they love cutting edge technology. So I've worked with some that are in the office environment, and they are the first to volunteer if there's a new way to do a survey, or if there's a new way to do business. They want to know what it is, they want to try it out. And sometimes they have these amazing ideas that other people may not have thought of. So making sure they're on the cutting edge of information is a wonderful thing to be able to do. They do like flexibility, and a lot of this information was pre-COVID. I did pull some COVID stats too to make sure I could share those with you. But they want to have their tasks, they want to have their work hours, and they want to make it work for them. And while Gen Y was looking more at purpose, what you're going to find with Gen Z is they really prioritize social responsibility and diversity. And as we mentioned, this is the most diverse generation that we've seen come through here in the United States. So it makes complete sense that they're looking for that diversity. And you're going to find that they may even be more collaborative than Gen Y was with that style. They're also, while Gen Y is also interested in their development, they're very interested in their development, but they're also willing to invest. And by invest, I mean spending a little more time doing some of the outside work that you maybe didn't see some of the Gen Y do initially when you were hiring them in. And they're also looking for those opportunities. So it's a great time to really mentor. And I'll talk about it a little bit later, but there's sort of like a reciprocal mentoring that happens in business that's been very valuable, where you're really sharing information and skills there. So on a more serious note, and this is one thing that we should cover too, is that, every generation has its traumas, right? So we look at, baby boomers. There were so many assassinations. It was the civil rights movement. It was the Vietnam War. Gen X, it was the AIDS epidemic. It was computers. It was the Gulf War, challengerexplosion.com. Gen Y was 9/11, really the rise of technology and social media, and also Columbine shootings. That wasn't anything we talked about. We didn't have active shooter drills. And then what you're going to see with Gen Z is, life after 9/11 and the diversity aspect that we talked about that I said is really big within this generation, some of the financial struggles, and then also COVID. So I want to address COVID here, and that COVID's thrown everyone for a loop, and it's really hit hard those who are venturing into the workforce. So some people were going into their first jobs or they're newly graduated. They've had classes, milestones, and other traditional structures changed, and they changed dramatically. And what's happened is it's instilled a deep fear that really shook the foundation from a lot of the research. So experts are saying that most likely when this generation comes into your business, aside from them maybe not having a job, in high school, they're going to need a little extra support. And it's not one of those things where we kind of joke, oh, it's, kind of like the snowflakes were again. This is different. When you have that sort of impact, it's a different world for them. It's also shown that this generation has more anxiety and more depression. So those are some of the personal challenges that your employees may be dealing with when you're bringing them in. So there are a lot of ways that we'll want to look at helping that Gen Z group and making sure they're supported as they start in business, because their foundation was very shook by the COVID piece also. So here's the big announcement, and this is the part that I think is fascinating. Beyond the surface tension, every generation values meaningful work. So what happened was Professor Kelly Weeks, she interviewed employees of all different generations, and she found that meaningful work ranked the highest for all of them. So guess what? We all have the commonalities, not the slams that we just talked about, not the jokes with the different generations. It's about the work. And also about the culture that they're part of. So the other interesting part of the research is that every other generation believed the other generations were focused on the money and the rewards, and they didn't really care about the meaning of the work. So once again, it's perception, right? And it's making sure that piece is understood there. And so in collaborating with others, that really is one barrier that we really could break down. So that's, I think, good for all of us to know that everybody really wants meaningful work, no matter how much we joke or get frustrated. These were some of the different quotes that she found from them. And this research was done before we had some of the information on Gen Z. But you can see each group, the value of the job and the value of the work was most important to them. Now, like I said, these interviews did show some differences, but it was a small sample. And that's where she went back and really dug into that work and to really understand, what the other groups thought of one another in the perception piece. So this ties into the differences that are happening and also some of the different stereotypes that come along with the different generations. So I have to share my favorite, and I think this is more of a universal truth of all of our life cycles. So it says, it's cut off a little bit, so it's harder to read, but I used to be with it, then they changed what it was. Now what I am isn't even what it seems, what it is, and then what seems it, sorry, and what's it seems weird and scary to me. It'll happen to you, right? So I use this cartoon as a reminder to all of us to really be compassionate to each other in our life cycle changes. And also as we progress and move toward, work solutions that work across the different generations. Because we already have established, we all want meaningful work. We all want work we love. We want to continuously grow and connect with those around us in the office and also in life. So since the pandemic has happened, there have been some changes. And really, if you're a business that's looking to attract talent, there's some things you need to think about. So what we're finding here is that people are looking, and there are some surprising pieces here. They are saying it's more important than ever to really establish relationships with employers. So I know, Lance, you mentioned you were having a hard time with people even getting back. You know, research is saying that people who are looking for jobs know that they need to start connecting and connecting early on. Now, the communications methods, that might be one of the further discussions we need to have. One out of every 3 Gen Xers reports they've reconsidered their career choices because they don't want to be in certain industries that were affected. So you can see they're turning toward things like, you know, safety and health in the workforce. And they're also turning toward like a marketing, sales, and like content production. And content production could be even like social media. So think about all the different avenues for information and connection that could be done, and could be done from about anywhere. And also we've seen kind of computing and IT really extend, but they're moving away from, and no big surprise here, construction and hospitality. As we all know, both industries got hit really hard during that time period. So they've moved away from some of those things. And this last point was one that fascinated me because I didn't think that Gen Z would care about this, but they do. That location. So 40% of Gen Zers reported that the pandemic had made them less likely to find a job outside of their hometown. You know, and who would have thought that before? Because even with remote work, there's that sense of community and family and support systems that really has been underlined, I think, for all of us in this current environment. So overall, there's a bunch of different information out there. So what I tried to do is, you know, kind of consolidate this. But if you're really looking to attract, you know, the Gen Y, Gen Z, there appear to be some themes, right? You know, culture. They want culture that aligns with values more so than in the past. It's not just a job for them. And they want a development plan. They want to know, how do I navigate through your business and how am I successful? And learning development programs, how do I get the information? Now, these are generations who proactively go out and seek information when they want to. I mean, Google it, right? They can find any, you know, training on the Khan Academy that they've learned from high school. They could YouTube it. They want that information. They want access to it easily for them. And also what they're looking for is, you know, flexible work opportunities. That was a theme throughout. And they also look for businesses that have a social media presence. It's almost like your currency right now. So you want to make sure that your business has that opportunity to connect with people, both Gen Y, Gen Z, and any of the other generations, and that you really are making the most of your social media presence. So really, this is the collaboration point. And, you know, what we find is that aside from all the jokes and stereotypes, the interesting part is we go back to that meaningful work, right? So while there are differences in communication styles, what we really need to do is give all of our employees, no matter what the generation, that opportunity for meaningful work. So I'm really advocating that a lot of businesses, if you're not currently doing surveys of your employees, that you start that up. This is a really quick and easy and no cost way to really align your business for success. So what you're going to want to understand is, like, what is your company comprised of? What are the demographics that you're dealing with? And when you know that information, you can really start to dig into your communications preferences of those groups and develop a strategy that works for you and for those employees. And, you know, we always talk about this too, is a culture that celebrates, right? So culture is very important to any of the, especially the younger generations, but any of the generations. You want people to be and feel included. So there's more of an opportunity right now to do both company events in person and also events digitally. As you've seen, we've all gone online. So there have been, you know, even at the start of the pandemic, you know, work happy hours, or even work events that were done, and speakers would come in for different groups and do sort of engagement and motivation stuff for the employees. So that's all offering a different option for us, and it's not going away. Right. So we always want to keep those digital options, but always have a face-to-face too.
Yeah, this when that paperwork was on my desk, I laid it over here. I figured it was to go to you and they didn't know where.
I think I'm gonna keep going. Sorry, I thought that was a question. I was gonna hop in with an answer if we needed one. And you also need to consider when you're talking about collaboration in the workplace, really a general life cycle of a career. And we don't always talk about this, and we don't always see it with in business that where people are looking at employees this way, but there are differences, right? We all go through the life cycle throughout our time on this planet. So early on in the career, that's really the time that people are looking for opportunities and challenges. Now, by all means, I'm not generalizing and saying this doesn't happen with the different groups, but that's where you see a lot of that starting in with that newer person. You know, they don't have the obligations of work and family. So how can you make sure you're engaging them at a level that they want to be engaged at? So mid-career, you know, this person wants more flexibility. They want that option to advance, and they're really looking at money because they are supporting a family, or they're supporting their hopes and dreams and looking toward retirement. And also the person with the established career, while they want like a work-life balance, there's also the option in the discussion piece of, you know, the financial piece of, you know, am I covered for my retirement? And if they are covered, a lot of people are doing work just because it's interesting, right? They love the work. This is the meaningful portion. So when you think about this and your employees and how you could really work with a team, you could look at a couple different ways. The first is really going, okay, so we know some of the life cycles here. Are there certain ways we can kind of divvy up work with the different groups? You know, what could that look like for our business? What kind of really mixed age teams could we put together? You know, and how can we get people to work together and share that information? And also, you know, this information be coming from some of your employee surveys, but what type of incentives really reflect for the people, right? Now, every manager should have a general idea of what their employees' incentives and rewards are and what they prefer most. But are there different ways we can do that and look at engaging people and making sure they're collaborating? Now, one piece throughout all of this was really mentoring. So mentoring's been big, but we've maybe been doing it differently than we probably should. So mentoring in the past was more of the, you know, the person who was more established in their career helping the younger person. But at this point, with technology and the way things are changing, it's really more of a reverse mentoring as well. So you want to make sure you have that opportunity where you have someone who may be more established, but may not be as tech savvy, working with that younger person on your team who may be more tech savvy, but not established in the business or within the industry or having the skills of what that other person has. And there's such a reward for that between the two groups and for your business. So those are some of the things that you want to look at when you are collaborating. So as Cindy mentioned, in my work, I do a lot of Berkman's and in talking to the different groups. So the questions that were coming up really from Gen Z and their hiring managers. So the first one, like Gen Z is going, you know, am I on the right track for my career? Am I doing everything I should? Is this what my career should be? And there's that satisfaction piece. And, you know, what type of environment and what type of manager is best for me? So they're asking those questions about your business, and they're really trying to get an understanding of, you know, where can they work best and what can they do? Now, for hiring managers, you know, this has been interesting too. It's really is, you know, is this person really a cultural fit? You know, does that work? You know, are they really a good communicator? And, you know, what is their work style? And that ties in a lot with culture, but it's really trying to understand if that person can do and can deliver, because those are some of the top skills that people are looking for. Now, what I found interesting is there was a large business, and what they did was they took new graduates that were all vying for jobs. And this was probably 6 months before graduation. They took them, about 30 of them, and had them in a 2-day training to learn more about the business. And then also what they did was engage them in an escape room, right? So this is all via Zoom, and all of these potential employees were put into an escape room, all digital, trying to figure out the best ways to work together to solve the puzzles. And awards were even given after that. So as hiring managers, you may want to rethink some of the different ways you're even attracting employees, because even in doing something like that, you can observe some of the skills that the different individuals are having and using throughout their, you know, decisions between the puzzle pieces and working with others, and how they navigate those difficult conversations where they disagree on things as well. So this is really a fascinating way when you start looking at, you should think about your hiring practices in a different light also. And that's kind of what we're looking at today. And I'm really looking at this and the different generational piece. And it's really going to boil down to emotional intelligence and communications. And that's going to be even more critical as we go forward. And that's really the true collaboration in the workforce, no matter what the age is. So what I like to say is, yes, you can have your cake. We all have different recipes, but there's so many wonderful things that all the bakers can make and we can all share. And there's always room for enhancements in any of the different teams. So what I'd love to do is I'd love to hear what you all are doing in your environments right now to really create a successful work environment for Gen Y, Gen X, or even any of the generations. Are these a lot of the different initiatives you're using as well with surveying employees? I think you're on mute there, Cindy.
There, that was awesome. Can we go back to picture of the group, stop share screen? Because I would love for them to be able to pick your brain and share ideas. And I love John's comment. He just said that the escape room reminds him of the old TV show, The Apprentice. So you get to say who's fired and who's not.
Right.
And then one other thing from the chat, and I want to make sure we cover your question. I mean, that was such great information. One of the things that Melissa Egbert was asking was if we'd heard about I think it's geriatric millennials.
Yes, and I think I have off of two slides here that didn't appear. I understand that, and I understand people are dividing and changing the different groups and trying to cut them up even more. The main point of this presentation, what I wanted everybody to take away with, is that that's sort of a general classification, no matter what it is, because the funny part is what it all boils down to is us connecting better. So yes, a friend of mine was talking that she was a geriatric millennial because she just turned 40. And we can classify, we can slice and dice, and there are so many different, agreements and disagreements about how we say the different generations. But what I really wanted to do was just put the general classifications of each one, and then offer the discussion that what it really boils down to is meaningful work. Now, granted, different communication styles and different ways we need to start reaching them, but that's what we're looking.
I love that. And Melissa, I had not heard that term, so I looked it up real quick while everybody was talking. And just so everybody knows, it's born 80 to 85, and they are thought to have a hybrid of skills between digital and analog, and that they make great managers. So just to define that, because if y'all saw that in chat, I thought that was interesting. But I love what Riley's saying. At the end of the day, it comes down to our ability to get along with one another and get some work done. So it's kind of a basic thing back to strategy and culture and why we look at people. So, and then the other, Cindy, if I can put you on the spot, Cindy is, an unbelievably expert recruiter, and in the construction industry is one of hers, construction industry and engineering and architecture. And Cindy, I'd love to hear from you what you're seeing with this workforce issue that we're having of how to get workers, especially in those work like physical labor work industries.
I'm trying to think in terms of, like, what do you mean? What in terms of your question?
How are you recruiting people to those industries?
Yeah, I think we need to be more social media. We're finding we text people more than email them. Referrals are big. I still laugh at the younger generation that wants to schedule an interview at 7 or 8 p.m. and is maybe not too wise about business hours. Flexibility is important. That's a key thing for them. And I think, they do. I love that saying about generation. They want things to be meaningful. They want to know that their work matters. They also want to be around other people their age. That's important too.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's huge. Yeah. And Joe Schlottman, for you, Joe is a part owner or one of a couple of owners in Dewey's Pizza. He's one of the founders of it. Original store, original pizza tosser and hires a ton of this generation. Joe, what are you finding these days?
Similar things to what Cindy mentioned. I think making it easy for them, and Riley mentioned too, right? Making it easy for them to apply. Um, Making it easy to interview. So definitely we've shifted to a whole phone first approach, which was not something we were engaged in pre-pandemic. And putting the values forward, I think helps them make a decision about whether it's a culture that they're interested in being around. And in the moment, the majority of the workforce, I think the relief that we didn't get, March and April were tough. And then May softening, June softening on how tough it was. And it seems like we're bringing a lot of really young people aboard, like high schoolers, so it'll be interesting to see like what happens in August, if we're going to be presented with another round of churn, just to kind of, okay, this was get through the summer and now the benefits are really running their course. And does that, combined with the vaccine situation kind of squaring itself, continuing to become a larger part, and people start to see the normal behaviors and then the concerns around being in a hospitality or construction type of environment, hopefully continue to soften along with them seeing those things. So that's what we're kind of hoping for. In the short term, it's like get through the summer. Yeah, we're accepting a little additional turnover by bringing in some high school kids who summer help was not really our first choice because we are so committed to training that we know the return on that training investment's likely not going to be as good as it would hopefully usually be. But that's sort of, the top of mind things for us in the moment.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really like that. You brought up some key points, both of you, on like, gosh, training dollars, how to keep people engaged. It's a new day. It's a new mindset of invest in me. So who else here is finding any tips and tricks that you want to share? And then I'll switch gears and ask any questions that or you can do both. I have no rules here. Tips and tricks that you have learned or questions for Riley or the group?
I appreciated the idea of the reverse mentoring. I know a few managers we have that are closer to the boomer side of the ledger, and they benefit from getting that, having an open discussion with somebody that's more tech savvy, especially with the continuing rapid change of the social media landscape and, our ability to connect with people. I can see the benefit of that. So I thought that was a nice add.
I would definitely echo that. I've never really thought of it in that kind of a framework before, but it makes perfect sense. And there's definitely a fair amount of that. We're in a construction-based industry with a lot of, technical type spreadsheets and different softwares and things of that nature. So there's a lot of times when the computer is our best friend as long as it works, and it's not very friendly when it doesn't. So we have a fair amount of that takes place, and that's a good way to think of it. So that's a new item for me for sure.
Awesome.
And there can be some generational frustration that happens too, because, someone might say, why am I reporting to this, 27-year-old? I've been doing this job for a really long time. So that's, upon every business to figure out with your culture, how do you engage people and how do you make it positive for everyone and make it so it's, a team as a whole, not just someone, the boss of someone else. And those are some challenges that you'll have to deal with. And especially if you're talking about some of the different tech spreadsheets and things that might need to be led in a different way. And vice versa for the younger generation too, to not just, expect someone who's doing the work currently to just adopt everything really soon. They have to make sure that they're explaining the tech well and make sure that it actually works, because sometimes technology doesn't always work, right?
Cindy, one of the things we've done recently was we intentionally changed our language and job postings from about the job to about the company first and the culture that we have instead of the skills that we were looking for. And we saw a significant uptick in applicants in this recent job we posted, and we hired within 72 hours when traditionally it takes about 3 weeks. We also made it intentional to take our mission, vision, and culture statement, instead of having it on a PowerPoint deck, we turned it into an animated video, and we included that into the link, and we attached that as well. And we don't know if or what either of those things had to do with the number of applicants that we received, but it was dramatic. We would typically get between 8 and 10 over a weekend, and we were well over 30. And that was just, and we've heard how tough it was going to be to hire somebody. So we went in going, pretty, with a little bit of trepidation, but we were blown away with the quality of the candidates and the people that fit, the type of people we fit, not necessarily the skills, because the skills were there, but the type we were talking to. So that was something that we did recently based on guidance we received from someone else.
That's awesome, Jim. Yeah, I've heard Darcy say to people, because she's a website junkie, because she feels like it needs to tell who you are and what your strategy is and cast your vision. And I've heard her say to people recently a number of times that go back and look at your website from the hierarchy point of view. And I love what you're saying. I mean, the animated video, all of that, because, right now, for most of us, we know how to get the clients. It's how to get the people to serve the clients. And so all of a sudden the website has a different purpose and meaning to it.
Absolutely. Making sure it's mobile enabled. I mean, those are things that we've talked about for a long time, I know, but it's always one of those pieces that you want to make sure, can they do it on their phone, right? Can they apply for the job? Can they watch the video? Does it still look good on the mobile phone?
Anybody else? A question, a comment, Jane?
No, I love the idea of the reverse mentoring too. And I love doing the videos. Yeah, I mean, we just have to speak to what the generation is looking for and what, is going to grab their attention. All great points.
Mm-hmm.
And even hiring practices, like Lance was mentioning, people weren't looking at their email. That might be one of those heads up where you go, okay, you'll receive an email. And even if it's a text message that goes out as well, your email was sent. How do we need to over communicate and communicate in ways that work both for us as a business and also for them to make sure we get their attention and get what we need?
We find in our organization, the best way to recruit is not only through email, but through text message, and then sending reminders that your virtual interview is tomorrow at 1:00. And it seems to work. Whereas before we would set the interview up and just assume or knew that somebody was going to show up virtually. And a lot of times they didn't. So the reminders for this particular generation seems to work for us.
So let me just comment on that, because that doesn't surprise me at all. But I guess when I'm hiring, I mean, I feel like it's a little bit of a test to, and everyone's business is different, depends on the quality of person that you're looking to hire. But if you got to babysit them just to get them to sit down in front of you, I start to worry about it. But at the same time, I'm not maybe interviewing as many candidates as Mary might be interviewing.
And I think it's a mindset change for me, because I'm like you, Lance. Initially I felt as though I was babysitting, but that's what I have to do.
I know.
my mind has to change the way I actually recruit, because at one time I was even floored by the fact that they didn't even know their social security number in the onboarding process. And I'm like, who doesn't know their social security number?
Right.
Well, that particular generation doesn't know, not off the top of their head, so it's me that had to make somewhat of a change. And the electronic onboarding process really works for me now. You know, I give them a week to do it. If they don't know their social security number, they got a week to figure it out in order to get paid.
Yeah.
And Lance, I get your point, and that's the whole piece of the discussion. You know, they prefer the text messages. I was working with a business and they had a very elaborate plan of a person went through a special kind of assessment test, and then they had to send an email back. And it was so elaborate that they were getting hardly any candidates, right? So we had to look at that and go, okay, first we got to make this a little bit easier for people to do. Because they're like, well, we want someone who can follow directions. I'm like, well, let's get them in first, you know, so we have a better pool of people, and then make sure that they can follow the directions that we have. And, you know, we're all going to come in with our generational biases. I'm going to say, just read your email, right? But if that's not their preferred conversation, you know, and way to connect with you, then that does make it a more of a challenge.
Right.
I'll sit down with them and I'll say, you know, I'll almost start with, I want you to talk about what you're looking for, and we're going to talk about what we're looking for. And at the end, I want you to think about this. And after having a day or so to think about it, why don't you email me tomorrow and let me know if you're still interested? And it's shocking how many don't email me the next day. Like, here's my card, just let me know. And if they were really good, you're kind of following up going, hey, I haven't heard from you yet. If you had a chance to think about it, but if they're not that good, you just kind of move on, you know. But it goes back to that conversation about culture. I don't want to just get in anybody that can fog a mirror. I want to try and talk to them about I want to make sure I'm not overselling and under delivering. I want to be honest on what we're looking for. You go home and kind of think about it, talk to anybody you got to talk to, and let me know. But sometimes even then I still don't hear back from them.
And what industry are you in? Would you mind sharing that?
I run a fitness club, a health and tennis club.
So would you be looking for like front desk employees, or would you
Yes.
looking for trainers? Okay.
Primarily.
Jane, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I work for an art organization, and we have a lot of youth, and we have a predominant year-round staff that probably are in the Y and the Z generations. And this last year, due to the pandemic, it really was a catalyst for us to rework our whole process from interviewing to hiring, and put things in a format that worked better for our potential candidates. So we've done, and that really, all of us of just saying, okay, what's that mean? So our platforms look different, where we source looks different. And actually we've had some really good feedback from our candidates, such as we were doing video and doing Zoom or something like that. Well, access to video, to Zoom wasn't always the best thing for our younger candidates. So now we've moved to Google, to the GoToMeetings. And so the other thing what you guys have talked about is that we just think differently sometimes, because of what shaped us, and then, you know, providing some support. So we've taken all our training, we've not all of it, but we're moving towards our training for our new hires to online, and did an animated videos for safety and health and things like that. So it's been an interesting year, but it does make you step back and kind of just make sure that the processes and your flows and your systems are working for your potential candidates going forward. Because in the end, we all want to attract the best talent, and talent that is going to carry forward the purpose of our organizations.
Yeah. Well said, Jane. Yeah. And I know a number of you have worked with me for quite a while now on hiring, and I am a junkie for a thorough hiring process, because a bad hire costs so much money and so much emotional energy, and I'll never let that go ever. But I think the thing that I'll always come back to is, you know, it's not just about the generations, it's also about supply and demand. And supply and demand is what we're facing right now, that the supply of people that we want to hire has dwindled. And so I always say that it's sort of like a teeter-totter with a fulcrum point, that when supply is low and demand is high, you got to do a whole lot more recruiting. You got to follow up with people. You got to stay in conversation with them. You got to woo them. You got to do animated videos because that's what they're interested in. You got to make it easy for them to keep the appointment because that's how they're wired. When demand goes down and supply goes up, guess what we all get to do? We get to be more demanding. We get to put on them the requirement of figuring out a darn computer and showing up on time and all of that. And so right now, I love Riley's point, which is I don't want any of the companies we work for to lower their standard of who they're bringing in. We do these chats and share ideas because, how do you stay on top of where we are in the supply and demand continuum? And how do we always get back to Riley's key point, which is people who have some level of emotional intelligence are going to be able to collaborate more. They're going to be able to lead people and inspire people a little bit better. And there's always place for people who just have raw intelligence. Okay. But this is so much around how do we have the emotional intelligence to reach out to every generation, understand the supply and demand curve that we're in from a business standpoint, and still not lower our standards of how we get to somebody. We just may have to kiss quite a few frogs before we get there. Oh, Joe Schlotman says free pizza for people who interview in person. I will be there. What time is my interview?
Tell your kids we can't afford you.
Yeah. Okay. It's 3:01. Anybody else? Riley, you want to wrap us up with your final charge and send off? And thank you. Thank you. It was a great presentation.
Well, I thank you all. I wanted to just collect some of the information. And like was mentioned, Gen Y can be cut. There are 4 different ways it's cut. There's another way that someone cuts it 2 different ways. Just the whole thought process was we all have different elements that have changed us and made us who we are based on the generations, but we still are unique because of how we were raised in our, nuclear home. And there's so much you can do with your employees. Just make sure you're understanding them and understanding where they're coming from, not sacrificing everything that you have, but just knowing where to meet them on their ground. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank all of you. So good to see everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was
Bye.
great.
Thank you.
Helpful.
Take care.